Good morning and welcome to MEREDA's virtual morning menu. We miss seeing all of you and having coffee, and hopefully that'll happen again soon. But for today, welcome. My name is Craig Young. I am a partner at the Bolus Company and also a board member of MEREDA and co-chair of the events committee. Today I'll be your host. I'll be joined by four esteemed panelists today. I'll get to those folks in just a moment. A couple of housekeeping items, if I may. First and foremost, I want to thank our event sponsor, Norway Savings Bank. Thank you, Norway Savings. It is with your support we're able to offer the series of morning breakfasts, which are free now through the end of June. We'll be holding a series of morning breakfasts. In addition to today, I'll be hosting an event next Friday where we'll be discussing commercial lending, and we'll have a couple of bankers, an appraiser, and a landlord dealing with everything in today's world. I think that'll be fascinating. For those who have questions for our panelists today, you'll notice in your lower right-hand corner, there's an opportunity to write in questions. I can see those and I'll ask those later in the day. So without further ado, let's get started with this morning's program as we discuss getting back to work and preparing our offices for everyone. Let me introduce our panelists, starting with Lisa Whited, a woman I've known for many, many years. I'm not sure Lisa or I want to admit to how many, but many years. Lisa is the founder and the Chief Transformation Officer at Workplace Transformation Facilitation. Welcome, Lisa. Also with us is Doug Martin. He is president of WH Demons. Doug is a professional engineer specializing in HVAC systems, building controls, and roofing systems. Also with us is Michael Suda. He's a senior environmental specialist at CES in Bangor. Michael will be walking us through some of the environmental concerns some building owners want to look at as they're reopening their buildings to businesses. And as I was saying earlier as we were preparing for this, last but not least is Diana Millville. She is the HR director of Clark Insurance, who I think is up to her eyeballs in preparing their offices for the return of their people, in addition to all the other HR and other work that she has. So we'll be spending a lot of time talking to Diana today. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. Let me start with Lisa. Lisa, I've known you for a lot of years. You're an interior space designer and a very good one at that. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you've made the shift somewhat into office safety and helping clients like Diana prepare for their folks to come back to work.
Sure. Yeah, as you said, we've known each other quite a while. I actually started 38 years ago as an office space planner and designer. And it was a few years into that work that I was seeing the link between physical workplace management and HR, and I was really curious. So I actually went back to school to learn more about organization management and got my master's about 20 years ago, and really focused on change management because I was interested in how we can engage the employees who are most impacted by the change in the conversation and in the process of that change, and make sure their voices were heard. A few years ago, what got my attention is a Gallup poll statistic that hasn't changed for years, is how unhappy and disengaged people are in the workplace. It's around 66% in the US and 87% worldwide. And we spend more time working than many other aspects of our life. So I wanted to know what can we do about that? So I actually rebranded my organization, and I wrapped up what I knew about group dynamics, leadership, strategic planning, and workplace design into an organization called WTF. And it is purposeful. Workplace Transformation Facilitation is WTF because it reminds me every day that I'm here on the planet to make a difference. So it's as in, WTF are you doing today, Whited, to make a difference. But I wasn't having enough impact for my own satisfaction. So a few years ago, I also aligned myself with a group in the UK, Advanced Workplace Associates, doing change management globally. And in the last 18 months, I've been embedded in an organization with 70,000 employees worldwide to create an agile and a workplace experience program for them. So what drives me in this work is my curiosity and how we can create great places where people are excited to show up every single day.
Great. And let's move into, I guess today's subject is how you've transformed that into the safety practice of getting people back to work. I know Diana is one of your clients. As people are beginning to open their offices, what are some of the first things they need to consider to reopen their offices from a safety perspective?
The first thing is the conversation with employees. It's really critical, and I know Diana's been all over this. Employees are freaked out, rightly so, and we need to make sure that they feel safe about what they're coming into. And it's different. Every employee's experience is different, and criteria that they need to consider. But the most important thing in the safety aspect is really first having that clear conversation with the leaders. It's an opportunity to revisit organizational purpose and vision, to get crystal clear on it, and then drive that message forward. The communication right now is so critical for companies to be communicating constantly and consistently with employees, and in allowing a place for them to give input and feedback back in that conversation. So that is one of the very first things. And then there are many other things that have been widely published and shared, which is awesome that we can learn from other, like China, other countries that are a few months ahead of us in this curve. So there's so many things around, touchless sensors, signage, distancing, sanitization, just many practices. It's really what we're talking about are new habits and behaviors that people have to take into the workplace with them if they're physically going into an office.
Great, and we'll get into some of the PPE stuff and where to get it and what you need in a moment. Let me move on to Michael a little bit. Michael, as people are reopening their office buildings, some people have standalone buildings. Today, I'm in my office at One Canal Plaza, a large office building downtown. There are certainly folks out there that have restaurants on their first floor or apartments as part of the building. What are some of the things that building owners need to be aware of as their buildings are being reopened from an environmental standpoint?
Thank you, Craig. There's a lot of things that may have happened as a result of the quick closure of your facility. From some of my clients here through CES, they just shut the doors and walked away, and they haven't been back since. And there's many things to consider when reopening the building. One of the things I recommend before you do anything is check with guidance. Look at the main CDC and the US CDC to see what they're suggesting for your type of work and how to reopen. Then the first step is to get a team together. And for everyone who's watching this webinar, they should look at the team members that are on this screen, because they're covering the different areas that need to be addressed when reopening a building. And I like to look at buildings as systems. There's individual systems within those buildings. So get your team together, get somebody for how to transform your workplace or set it up in a way that that enhances the employee experience or the customer experience. Make sure you have your HR and risk manager there as well. Have your technical support, such as your engineers or all your technicians related to your systems. And you may want to talk to an environmental person if you have the need to look at a system or something else where there's an issue. So get the team together and do a plan, and then start going down system by system before you open up to make sure there's not any unintended circumstances that occurred because of closing that would cause environmental issues within the building.
Sounds good. So that leads us to having an engineer, and we happen to have one with us today. Doug, tell us a little bit about what to look for from an HVAC system standpoint as people are restarting their systems. Air quality is very important. I know you and I have discussed there are some short-term things people can do to enhance their HVAC. And then later in the program, we'll talk about some longer-term things that we can do. Let us know what you think we should do from an HVAC standpoint.
Thank you, Craig. As people start to re-enter the workplace and get into their offices, they need to take a very close look at their HVAC system, the air handling system that's providing hopefully fresh and clean air to their office space. These systems, although we don't really see them, they are a critical part of maintaining good air quality within the space, or as we say, IAQ, indoor air quality. And systems that have been sitting idle for a long period of time or have had no maintenance need to be reviewed with your engineer of record and your service company. It's very important to maintain your HVAC systems so that they are delivering clean, healthy air to the space. So the way these systems work, the air that is distributed to your office runs through an air handling unit, and there are air filters, or there should be air filters, and there's all different types of air filters that are available. These air filters have different ratings. The ratings are listed in a MERV rating, like a MERV 8 or MERV 10. And the higher the number, the more effective they are in reducing the particulate in the air. Many of you may know or have heard of HEPA filters. HEPA filters are used a lot in medical institutions, hospitals, doctors' offices. And the HEPA filters work quite well in removing 99% of the viruses and bacteria in the air and mold spores. The problem with these HEPA filters is they create a large pressure drop, which a lot of off-the-shelf air conditioning systems can't handle. So you need to review your air filtration system and determine what is the highest possible MERV rating or filter efficiency that you can install in the system. The other thing you need to do is you need to go through your air handling unit, make sure your coils are clean, and that you're bringing in the proper amount of ventilation air, fresh air, air from the outside. All these systems, or the majority of these systems, use about 80% of the air is recirculated from the office back to the air handling, back to the office, and then they bring in somewhere around 20% of the outside air. And this outside air gives you what is needed as a minimum requirement to keep the building fresh and healthy. So along with the air filtration, you want to make sure you're bringing in outside air. And then there are new products out there that actually help improve the efficiency or the effectiveness of the filters. We've heard a lot about UV lighting systems. UV light works well on surfaces that it shines on. Doesn't work so well on cleaning up the air. There are also products available using ionization technology, which puts charges into the airstream, charges the ions. These charged ions then cause the particulate in the air to attract each other and build in size. And by the particulate building in size, it makes the filters more effective. These ionization units also pull the hydrogen atoms away from viruses and basically making the virus inactive and potentially killing off the virus. And so the proper use of ionization technology with filtration and making sure your HVAC systems are clean is a big part in making sure that when you bring your employees back into the office space, that they are being brought into a healthy and safe environment.
And Doug, on some of these ionization things you were just talking about, are the things you can add to existing HVAC systems to do that, or do you need to replace your whole system if you want to look at protecting yourself better?
No, the ionization technology has actually been around for quite some time. Some of you may have seen or heard of electronic air filters. They were used a lot in residential units, and they do the same thing. They put a charge into the air, a natural charge. There's no chemicals. It's all natural, and then that charge causes them to stick to a metal type of filter, which needs to be washed. The ionization units that are out there now, they're used in the growing industry, especially in the cannabis industry, where they're trying to keep mold off the plants. And it's So it's been around as far as that goes. And the units that you can buy now, you can actually install them in most air handling units at a cost of less than $1,000 a piece. And they can be tied into the HVAC system, and they have the maintenance requirement on them is very small. And they do a fantastic job. And what they actually, what you will see is you'll probably have to change your air filters a little bit more frequently than you're used to. Craig?
So that's something someone can look at immediately, which is great. Diana, let's move to you. Before we jump into where you're at today, let's just take a step back before COVID-19 hit. How big is, I know you folks are located in Outer Congress Street. You have a beautiful office building, fairly new. Tell us a little bit about pre-COVID, say March 1st. How big is your building? How many employees did you have in the building every day? What was life like pre-COVID?
So pre-COVID, we are in a 25,000 square foot building, as you said, relatively new. We're coming up on 3 years old. We had 96 people in the building pre-COVID. So we have other locations, one in Manchester, New Hampshire, with about 12 people, and then another in Lowell, Massachusetts, with half a dozen employees in that location as well. So pre-COVID, we were a busy office.
And when did you effectively close the office and send people home?
Everybody, we were 100% work from home by the last week of March. We started to phase some people home gradually. To be perfectly honest with you, we didn't have all of our technology in place to allow everybody to work from home. So in a matter of about 6 days, we scrambled to get enough VPNs and have the equipment ready for people to be able to take it home and to get themselves set up. So it was by March 31st, we were 100% work from home.
And I think that's common. Our office was much the same. We closed on Friday, the 13th of March. And I think it took a week or so for people to fully get home and try to work from there. So everyone's home. At some point, you know, you need to come back. Our office is open this week. As I said, I'm here in my office today. Have you started bringing people back to your offices? And if so, when did that happen?
Okay, we did. We started bringing people back May 4th. And really, it's a voluntary group of people that have returned. I would say we currently have about 28 people in this building now. And
so about a quarter.
It's about a quarter of our staff. And we have about 5 people in our Manchester, New Hampshire office, and nobody in our Lowell, Massachusetts office at this point. Lowell's just too much of a hotbed.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's just too much of a hotbed for us to have anybody there.
So let's talk about what life was like in COVID. You brought 28 people back. What are some of the first things, the challenges you had to prepare your office building for the return of people? Knowing that you have social distancing, cubes need to be 6 feet apart. You've got kitchen issues. I'm sure you have lobby issues. Walk us through those first few days as people came back.
Yes. So prior to their coming back, a handful of us were in here literally taping painter's tape on the floor with arrows so that we could direct people through the building. Physical distancing is really the biggest safety precaution we want to make sure we're taking so that people are not within 6 feet of one another. We limit the number of people who can be in conference rooms. And we have signs outside of every conference room saying how many people can be in that space. As far as our kitchen is concerned, we have a limit of the number of people who can be in there and physical distancing signs all over. In fact, we have stop signs that say don't proceed if there's somebody in front of you. You just can't go any further. You need to wait until they're done. The other thing that we have done is we have cleaning supplies literally everywhere in the building. Wipes by the photocopiers, wipes in the kitchen, and every individual, based on a policy that we created prior to people returning, every individual is responsible for confirming that they're cleaning up before and after themselves to continue to keep people feeling safe and knowing that it's clean here.
Yeah, and Lisa, maybe you can chime in. What are some of the other first things people need to do as people are coming back. I know in our offices we have a few cubes and we've added extensions to all of those. We have arrows on the floor. We have hand sanitizer. It feels like it's everywhere. We have secondary kitchens set up and a whole workflow. Elisa, what else should people be thinking about that may not be obvious?
Everything that Diana said, the signage, the arrows, everything you've experienced. And I know many organizations have their floor plans, they're studying them, they're looking at that distance. But it's sort of the things, it's interesting because this came up with Diana and I talking recently. You think on a plan that somebody is 6 feet apart in their workstation, but the concern came up, well, what if I'm going to turn and collaborate with somebody? Am I then all of a sudden not 6 feet? So it's really questioning, and it's interesting because I know the title of this is Return to Work, but really we're talking, people have been working for the last 8 weeks. We've not been on a beach in Hawaii. So people are working. It is,
Although we wish.
and so the question, right. So the question is, what have we been doing over the last 8 weeks for collaboration that's worked? And it might look, when we come back into the office, how we collaborate may look different than what it was before we left the office. So I guess what I'd say, the things that maybe are not as obvious is the pause to have these conversations and think and consider what are the good things that have come out of our remote work experiment, massive remote work experiment. And then what are the good things we still want to be able to retain and hang on to when we're back together? I mean, collaboration and connection are two of the things we often hear people saying they want to have. Social cohesion is a really important part in a cognitive factor of productivity. My husband, who works for a local large firm and is an IT specialist, he said, I really miss my connection in the office. And I said, but Pete, if you go back, you're not going to have that connection because of social distancing. So it means we need to be more purposeful and intentional of how we do connect with each other. And what have we done over these last 8 weeks? So I think it's a great opportunity to say what's worked and ask your employees what has worked, what's not worked, and then also go back to before, so I've done many surveys. I always survey before I start a project and ask employees what's going well and what's not going well. And over again, disruption, noise, distraction, and thermal comfort. So I'm so glad that Doug and Michael are both here. Those are the things that people are bothered about in the office. So what are those things that we can solve for when we come back physically into the office? And then what are some behaviors and things we've learned through how we are connecting and collaborating in this new world that we can also bring back into the office?
And Michael, what are some of the other things to look at? We had talked about offline a little bit, plumbing systems. You have multi-tenanted buildings where you have maybe residential uses or industrial uses, or you have a restaurant on the first floor with office spaces elsewhere. What are some of the other things you need to look at?
Well, some of the things, if you're a building owner that has multi-tenants and you have control over those systems, like the HVAC system, the heating and ventilation system, you review that system, like Doug said, and make sure it's operating the way it should be. The other things to look at are exhaust systems, which may or may not be tied to the HVAC system. And the things that come to mind, especially in this time of people being anxious coming back to work and afraid they're going to get sick at work, is bathroom exhausts, elevator exhaust. Are they working? Have they ever been cleaned? Because I don't know if you've ever opened your bathroom exhaust at home, but it gets covered with lots and lots and lots of lint. So that's something that should be looked at to make sure it's effective, because there is reports out there that there could be transmission of virus from fecal matter, and that's a real issue in any virus. That happens with hepatitis as well. So for plumbing systems, if you hastily shut your building down or there's been no water flow in the plumbing system, biofilms and bacteria can start to grow inside the pipes. The reason for this is if you're on a municipal system that treats the water, the treatment chemicals start breaking down over time. It's the same thing I recommend in offices that are making their own mixtures of sanitizer using Clorox and water. If it's sitting around in a bottle for a month, it's no longer as strong as it once was. So always have fresh bottles of sanitizer if you're making your own. So one of the things I recommend very strongly is to flush all the water systems before you open, especially drinking fountains, especially sinks. Flush all the toilets. While you're doing that, try to pour some water down any floor drains or open drains, because the U-traps may have dried out there, so you could get sewer gas coming into the space. And if people have odd smells or don't feel like the air is clean or the environment's clean, it's going to add to the anxiety. One thing that we've dealt with here at CES, mainly in the medical or the senior citizen homes that exist in Maine, is there's a natural occurring bacteria that some of you on this call may have heard of, called Legionella. And back in 1976, it was discovered during a Legionnaires' convention in Philadelphia that it had been in the environment, but it had never caused disease that actually killed people. And the bacteria basically can be sprayed from shower heads or come from air conditioning systems where the droplets get in the air and people breathe them in. And it creates a pneumonia. In fact, Maine had a case last year where 6 people were sickened and 1 person died. And New Hampshire, I believe, 2 years ago had a cluster occur as well, where some people, I don't think anyone died, but like 40 or 45 people became sick. The bacteria is natural occurring in the water, and it gets an opportunity when there's no disinfection and flow or temperature, cooler temperatures, to propagate inside systems. And so if that gets sprayed into water and people breathe it in, they could get a pneumonia. And if they're very old, very young, or have pre-existing health conditions, they could get very, very sick and die. It doesn't spread person to person, but all the symptoms are exactly the same as COVID-19. You get a headache, you get a fever, and you're having trouble breathing. So we don't want to have that be another anomaly that occurs during reopening. So flush everything. If you have water tanks, flush them, especially hot water tanks that may have been turned off during that period. Just flush them all and start over. And I think that's a real important thing for that system to look at when we're reopening a building.
That's very interesting. Diane, I'm wondering how many of these things you folks have done, if all, maybe all of them.
Yeah, we've done.
Question for you, Diana.
Yeah. Sorry.
As people are coming back, looking at safety, are you testing any of your employees as they come in? I know some people are taking temperatures, certainly at nursing homes and whatnot. What is your protocol for people coming back to the office? Are you requiring people coming back to the office? Is it still voluntary? Where are you folks on that side of it?
So our first stage was really voluntary. There are a group of people for whom working at home just didn't work. They didn't have the proper space. It just wasn't working for them. So it was voluntary. It has been voluntary, and the second phase is essentially going to be voluntary as well. We are implementing or have implemented screening. The state of New Hampshire requires that temperatures are taken, as well as a series of screening questions. And Maine does not require temperatures, so we are not doing temperatures here in our main office. We're utilizing a survey tool in order to capture the screening questions for people before they enter the building.
And are you allowing clients or vendors into the building at this time?
No clients at this time. We're also not having any of our vendors come into the building at this time. Some of the services that we have to have, cleaning, obviously they're coming into the building. As far as our other services, the mail is being picked up outside of the door. So no, we don't have anybody coming in.
And is that also true for New Hampshire? And I think you said Lowell isn't open yet for obvious reasons. Boston is still really in the thick of things.
True for all locations, and our sales agents are currently not meeting with clients face to face. We're doing a lot of virtual meetings with our clients right now. So that's continuing with our sales team as well.
And you mentioned you're in a phased operation of bringing people back. How many phases do you foresee, and how long do you think it is before everybody's back to the office?
I'd love to answer that question. We're still trying to make a decision on that. Obviously, we are continuing to monitor the situation as things open up and as we see more testing. We're really monitoring the situation day to day. We have been in this building since May 4th, and I don't anticipate a second phase until June 1st. We're sort of aiming for that as our second phase. Additional phases, we may have 1 or 2 additional phases, but we haven't made any decisions on those dates yet.
And Doug, I think you are also in a larger office, number of employees. I know that you've largely stayed open during this time frame. Can you talk a little bit about your situation, how many employees you have, how many people continue to come to the office, and are you phasing people back in, and how does that look for you folks?
Yeah, so at WH Demons, we do have a fair amount of office staff. And when the pandemic started and we started thinking about how to restructure our operation here, we were fortunate that because we have a large number of technicians who are electronically connected to the office through tablets, we had the technology in place. So a lot of our engineers and managers initially were able to and wanted to work from home. So we took an office staff of approximately 15 people, and we started with probably 80% of them out of the office. A few of us came in every day. We were fortunate that we had, masks, we had sanitizers, we had our HVAC system up and running properly using ionization technology. So we had a fairly comfortable office environment. Plus, we went around and we cleaned the office twice a day. We wiped down surfaces. If we had a meeting with more than, in a meeting room with 2 or more people in it, after the meeting was finished, we went in and we wiped down surfaces, sprayed some additional aerosol around. And that seemed to do a pretty good job and made people feel comfortable. As time went on, we've started to bring employees back. So at this point, we actually require employees to be here at least 2 days a week, and then they can work from home the rest of the time. A lot of our projects, we do need collaboration. And while using Zoom meetings has helped considerably, it's also nice when you're sort of brainstorming design changes and improvements to do that in a collaborative fashion. And it's nice if you can do it in the same room and feel healthy. The other thing that we did is we have a couple of meeting rooms, and our smallest conference room sits about 6 people comfortably in the old style of doing business, seats next to each other. We also have a conference room upstairs that is quite large and could probably do training in that room with 20 or more employees. And we've converted that to just a large meeting room where now we can bring 6 or 7 people in to that space and have a complete meeting and keep 6 feet distance from each person in that room. And we've got our rooms, both conference rooms set up now for Zooming conferences. And so that has worked very well. So that's what WH Demons has done. And we also, for our field technicians, what we've been able to do is they are all given personal protection equipment to deal with the virus. They all have face masks. They all have hand sanitizers. They have wipes. When we go into a building now, we call ahead. We check with our contacts, find out what their guidelines are to enter the building. When we come into a building and we work on a HVAC system, we will do that with our tools. And when we leave the building, we make sure we wipe up and clean up after ourselves. And then after we leave the building, anything we brought into the building is wiped down and sprayed so that it's ready for the next appointment that we go on and not carrying any viruses around with us. And in talking about getting your building ready, I think one thing I need to bring up is doing a proper PM. Some people call that a preventive maintenance. We call it a planned maintenance here at WH Demons. And most companies understand that their HVAC systems are mechanical systems, and like a car, they need to have routine maintenance done to keep them in good working order. With most HVAC systems in offices, they're usually somewhere between, doing a biannual cleaning or PM, and a lot of them are quarterly. Some of the places we work in the laboratories, in health industry, they want monthly PMs. But to do a proper PM, it's not, I don't want people thinking that you're just going to save money by taking the least expensive PM contract. What ends up happening is companies don't do a lot. They'll give you a low price just to get in to change a filter and leave, and then hope for something to break down so they can make their money. What we like to do at WH Demons is our PM contracts are tied to tasking sheets. And so every piece of equipment that we work on gets its own tasking sheet. It's electronically filled out and submitted to the customer at the end of the PM, so they can see actually what we did, whether it was changing filters, doing temperature checks, doing humidity checks, putting the equipment through its paces, making sure that the economizers and the dampers are working properly so they're bringing in outside air. I think this is very important because it holds everybody accountable. And that's the other reason why it's always nice to have a PM working with you and for you, because a PM, or excuse me, an engineer, a professional engineer is required to meet a code of ethics or they can lose their license. And so we are very serious and very critical that we follow a very strict guidelines when we're doing service in our buildings for our customers, as well as how we design the systems to make sure that they work correctly. Greg?
That sounds great. We have a question from our viewers asking how many people are having their employees wear masks in the office, in their common areas, whatnot. Probably start with Diana.
So we're requiring masks anytime anybody's working within 6 feet of one another. We're in a 25,000 square foot building with 29 people right now. Once we have more people come into the building, we're very likely going to have them wearing their masks as they're moving about the building. We haven't implemented that just yet, but definitely if they're sitting together, collaborating, training, they are wearing their masks.
And Doug and Michael, how about your offices? I think you both have larger offices. Are people wearing masks as they're walking around the offices?
We are not. We have issued masks to all our employees, and what has been said is the same thing that Diana said, is that if you're within 6 feet, you need to wear the mask within the building. We have a very flexible working relationship. Most of our people are in the field anyway doing work, and they are geared to work from home. And so we allow those who want to be at home to be at home. I agree with Doug that, having those informal meetings and being able to chat about things is a big loss right now for people in my business. And I'm hoping that wearing the mask will help encourage more of that informal, project work that we do in rooms together.
Yeah, at WH Demons, we do not require masks to be worn in the office. Again, we have pretty good social distancing on the most part. If someone comes into our office from the outside, they need to set up a meeting ahead of time. We meet them at the door. We do require those people entering to wear masks. And if they are uncomfortable and want us to wear a mask, we will wear a mask. Any employees that we have that do feel comfortable with a mask, they are wearing them. Others who feel comfortable without are not. But we do a pretty careful check with all our employees on a daily basis. We have a number of remote temperature guns where we can take the temperature of an employee or a visitor by scanning their foreheads. And we are very serious about, if you do not feel well at all, you do not come into the office.
Interesting. Lisa, I'm assuming you don't wear a mask if you're at home, since you're a smaller business.
No, but if anybody comes in, or if we're going out, of course, I make my kids make us all wear them. So, yeah.
let's talk about some lessons learned. Obviously, we've had this massive remote working experience. A lot of people, as Diana said, weren't prepared to send everyone home, and yet we all seem to do it. Lisa, maybe starting with you, what are some of the lessons we can learn going forward um, from the last 8 weeks where people have just had to go home and work and figure it out?
Yeah, and as you said, it's certainly not been the most ideal situation where it was done so quickly without proper time to plan for it. And I think the biggest thing that needs to be highlighted, and those of you with young kids know this, that it's just incredibly difficult to be working and have young kids. It's really shouldn't even be asked, I think, of people. It's a tough scenario. But there was a global study that was just published last week. And if you send out resources, I can send a link because I think people will be interested in some of the data. It was done over the last 6 weeks, a remote working study of about 2,800 people, I think it was, across all 5 generations. So you can see people's response by generation, as well as all different industries and sizes of companies from 100 or fewer to 25,000 or more employees. And so I just had a couple of points I thought I'd share with you, I thought which was interesting. And it was interesting, the 2 generations having the most difficulty doing remote work are the silent generation, which you might expect with technology perhaps being a challenge, but Gen Z, and we think Gen Z are digital natives. But I think that part of that is because the office is a real important social factor for younger people. And also I think many younger people might be living in places where it's not ideal. Maybe they've got too many roommates around them or what have you to do work. So before the pandemic, in this study, about 30% were working from home already anyway. And then because of the pandemic, it went to 88%. So we know in a really short time, it just grew so quickly. And 77% overall, despite the challenges that the silent Gen and Gen Z have raised, are feeling like they're working successfully from home. So there's a lot of other really good, interesting stuff in that study. But I've also interviewed business leaders over the last few weeks. I've had about 11 different interviews, and I'm asking them, what's working well, what surprised you, what's a real challenge? And actually, the sentiment can be summed up in a conversation I had last night when I was walking my dog. I ran into the president of a medium-sized architecture firm here in Portland, and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he said to me, my blood pressure has gone down. I feel like we've done really well. We're connected. We're doing okay. He said, I don't know that we're going to go back to the way things were before. And I think, again, I've been saying it since I started talking to you, Craig, but I just think we need to find the good lessons from this experiment and see how we can bring it back into the work that we do and create environments that support those authentic conversations. The caring and compassion is another thing that leaders have talked to me. They're seeing empathy that their colleagues are having for each other. They're seeing silos being broken down because there's more purposeful, intentional connection. That's all good stuff, right? That's all stuff that makes our companies more profitable. You make your people more happy, right? And it will help you attract and retain great people. So I think that there's just so much to learn from this awful, tragic event, but there's so much we can learn from it. And that is exciting to me to think what our future will look like.
Yeah, and you mentioned the socialization. I think that's a tough thing in a lot of folks. They're used to coming to their offices. They have friendships there. There's socialization there. There's just getting out of your house. Diana, how have you managed the socialization amongst 100 employees, staying in contact, outreach? How have you continued that over the past 2 months?
So we have done, as everybody else, we've utilized Zoom in many different ways. I know that there have been some happy hours that have occurred after hours with our team members who have gathered and had a little bit of a social hour with one another. Our management team has utilized Zoom and where they may have only met with their team once a month normally to have department or unit meetings, they increased that to once a week to really have that check-in. I have individually reached out to every employee at least a couple of times during this period of time that they've been out. Constant communication through email. So really, it is that deliberate touch, as Lisa said, that we're trying to make sure that we're reaching out to people and keeping things fun, having some fun activities that allow people to connect and get that socialization.
And again, I assume it's a goal to bring everyone back to the building in time.
It is our goal to bring everyone back to the building. I will say that telecommuting has been on our part of our discussion for quite some time. This really accelerated the experience for us and kind of gave us the opportunity to see what worked, what didn't work, and some of the technology changes that we may need to make in order to have more telecommuting available in the future. And also, as Lisa said, there are some conversations we need to have and some training we need to do to really implement how to connect differently going forward. So yeah, it's made some changes, but we are intending to have everybody come back.
And Doug and Michael, what are some of the other sort of environmental lessons looking at going forward, whether it be HVAC systems or just environmental? What are some of the takeaways over this last 8 weeks?
I think the importance of maintaining your systems and running a clean environment has become a little more attentive, I guess is a good way to put it, as a result of this. I think a lot of people, because they don't see the systems, let them go and maybe say, that's next year's cost or something like that. I think it's time to really double down on the air quality or the environmental quality of all offices and workplaces. One of the questions that you asked me before is how does a owner of a building with multiple types of businesses deal with it? And I have a resource that I'd like to mention, and we can connect it somehow afterwards. If people go to www.backtowworksafely, that's one word, backtowworksafely.org, there's a bunch of different reopening considerations for different classes of facilities, such as gyms, or such as restaurants, or such as offices. It's a fantastic resource. It's part of the professional society I've been a member of for over 38 years. And it's got really good information that's updated regularly. Again, with the caveat that you should still make sure your state and local government agencies are allowing you to reopen, because they don't want you just to run right off, because every state's different throughout the country. But I think those are important things. It's just how to look at your buildings and how they are, basically organic systems. They have to operate very well to keep people safe and healthy, because we all know in the winter it's cold and flu season and half your office is sick. That's the same principle. It's the exact same principle as this.
And Doug, I know I've got a client who's a dentist who's building a new building, and she's made some decisions to change some of their HVAC systems and some other things with what's going on. What are some of the things that people ought to consider today as they're looking at renovating buildings, building new buildings, implementing new systems? What should they look at?
Well, like in most things in life, there's no simple or one answer. But when we're looking at improving the indoor air quality, and the one thing that has come out of this whole thing is I've had a lot more one-to-one conversations with building owners lately, and what they can do to help their employees and create a safe environment. And so when you're designing a building or looking at going into a new building, I think the first thing that has to happen is you need to make sure that you are working with a registered professional engineer. They are designed, they are required and held to a certain level of design professionalism that allows them to create an indoor environment that should and most likely will create a safer and healthier place to live. What we're doing here is we're looking at, are you bringing in enough fresh air? Make sure that you're designing your building so you have the ability to bring in outside air to heat it and to cool it. We're in a unique location here in Maine where we have an average temperature is 50 degrees. We have year round, so that we have the ability to use outside air a lot for cooling. Or as it gets warmer, we can't necessarily use that outside air as much. The next thing we're looking at is air distribution. Air distribution is hugely important. If we get too much mixing of air, high velocity air within a space that is occupied by customers and employees, then we start mixing contaminants up. What we try to do here is our recommendation is we're going to supply the air from the ceiling, and we're going to return the air at the floor level with low wall grills. This creates probably one of your safest indoor environments and keeps the air clean. You're getting the fresh air at the ceiling, and as it comes down slowly to the floor in the occupied space and picks up contaminants, and then it is exhausted or returned to the air handling unit at the floor level. You can also do that and reverse, apply it at the floor and return it high. That's called a displacement ventilation system. That's very popular, especially in classrooms and large meeting areas. The next thing we look at is air filtration. Make sure that you're using the proper air filters and design your new system so they can actually work with a more efficient filter. And finally, it's interesting that you bring up a dentist's office. We just retrofitted we just did a new dentist's office 2 years ago. And what we've added to them in the last couple of weeks is we put in the ionization units in each air handling system that they have within the space. And the beauty of that is it brings it uses the charged ions to, as I said, make the filtration system they have more effective, helps in killing the viruses. Of course, it has not been tested with COVID-19, so let's make sure we understand that, but it still is very effective in viruses and flus. And the other thing it does it changes the hydrogen atoms, which the viruses actually use as an engine to get around. It pulls the hydrogen atom away from the viruses and turns it into to water, which is great in the wintertime and adding humidity to the space. So those are the things that we look at in moving forward with a building is making sure that we have fresh air, good air distribution, air filtration, and using the latest technology to improve the effectiveness of the filtration system.
Great. We have a couple other questions in these kind of few minutes left. Diana or anyone on the panel, have any of your employees come down with COVID-19? And I'd say, Diana, if an employee has COVID-19 and ends up being in the office, is there a protocol for what you'll do should that occur?
Yeah, we do have protocols. We're hoping with the screening that we don't have to worry about that. But if somebody were to become ill, we would follow all of the CDC guidance as far as the protocols are concerned. We would have to probably have folks go home for 14 days to make sure that nobody else gets sick. So yeah, that's the one that keeps me up at night, to be honest with you, is the protocols that we'll have to follow to keep everybody safe.
Yeah. Doug, anyone from your office? I assume no one's had COVID-19. I assume you have the same protocols in place.
Yeah, we haven't had, no one's been tested, but no one knows of anybody that's they work with outside the office. No family members. We have probably we have 50 employees that are most of them are out on the road, and none of them have come in contact with anybody that they know who has COVID-19.
There was an article I saw online earlier today regarding bringing pets to work. Lisa, do you recommend people bringing their pets back to work early on? And then I'll move to Diana. Are you allowing people to bring pets to work?
Well, that's interesting. I do want to just add that several of my colleagues in the UK group that I'm part of, there are 50 of us globally, and either directly or their partners, there's been at least 7 cases of COVID-19. And all I can tell you is, as I interact with these people, I just, that's why I'm sort of incredibly, my husband would say I'm over the top with it, but I do not want to have anybody in my family get this virus. It's awful. It's funny you ask about the dogs. I took my dog out last night, as I said, and my neighbor stopped to chat, and she said, "Oh," she started to go to pat him. She said, "Oh, is it okay if I pat your dog?" And I think that so yes, I did. She had already started to pat him, but I would not bring a dog into the office. I think it's great when companies do it, but just for the concern of if somebody was exposed, touches the dog, you touch the dog. I mean, why would you want more exposure than even necessary? I think until we have a vaccination or there's something we're truly comfortable with, which sadly I think is at least 18 months out, we've just got to continue to be incredibly careful in every interaction. But I will say before COVID, as a feature, people love being able to have dogs at work. But right now, yeah, no, I'd say no.
And
Diana, what's your policy?
We don't have pets at work.
Yeah, seems. Well, we have just a few minutes left. I want to give each of you an opportunity for sort of a closing comment. Lisa, any lessons learned from COVID-19 or your thoughts of the future? Is office space going to continue, and will you be planning more offices for more companies? What are your thoughts going forward?
I'm an optimist at heart, despite the WTF name, which might seem like I'm cynical, but I'm very much an optimist. But I also am a realist, and I recognize that work as it's been is broken. And to think that there's a rush to go back to work the way we used to is a missed opportunity. Between gender inequality, diversity and inclusion, the state of our planet, that statistic that drives me in my work, that 87% of people worldwide are unhappy at work. This is an opportunity to hit pause, to have these essential conversations, to get super clear about organizational purpose and vision, and then decide what work looks like. I do think people are going to continue to want to work in a physical place. It's something that we've always done. Social cohesion is important, but how people come back together can look very different to how it was before COVID.
Doug, your thoughts going forward?
Yeah, my thoughts going forward, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And so the virus is very, very, we need to take it very, very seriously. And that sort of goes on the same note with your HVAC system. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It's there for a purpose, to do a job. The guidelines that we design around have been vetted for years. They have improved dramatically over the years. The codes that are out there that need to be followed are there for a reason. Those codes are there to protect the employees and the occupants of buildings. And it's so important that you have somebody working with you that understands the codes and designs that way. One final closing note, if any of you are interested in learning more about air purification and what you can do, you can go to the WH Demons website, and we do have an air purification page that talks about the new technology and what's out there and what's available for you, either working with us or with other engineers and contractors. And thanks a lot for having me.
And Michael, your thoughts? I assume you agree with Doug and most of his, but
100%.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, you need to pay attention to things. One thing I try to communicate, because risk is hard to communicate, and Doug kind of mentioned this a little bit about not seeing things. If you look at all the people as of today that have perished as a result of this throughout the whole country, we would basically have 17 school buses crashing every day and everyone dying in it. That's assuming 50 people in those school buses. So this is a real thing. And I think the opportunity going forward is to look at things in a different way, just like Lisa said. One of the things that I want to mention before we run off here is the going forward, before there's a vaccine, there will be what they call contact tracing. You may have heard about it in the media, where if they get pockets of people getting sick, they're going to contact your company and say, we can't tell you who it is, but we had somebody that was positive, and now you have to do something. I believe deep cleaning is going to need to happen. Reviewing all your systems is going to need to happen. And to reduce anxiety, you may have to do some surface testing or environmental testing to be able to determine whether the SARS SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes COVID-19, is still present. And we at CES have aligned ourselves with a couple laboratories, and we're able to do that. So if you ever find yourself where you're a hotspot, give us a call at CES, and we can help you help the anxiety by saying, yes, how clean is clean. And thank you for having me on this as well.
Sure. And Diana, final thoughts from being knee deep in it all?
My
Are you
final
ready?
thoughts are, my final thoughts are things are always changing. So we are definitely being flexible. We're always looking and re-looking at things as we move forward. We're not in a hurry to do anything really. And as Lisa mentioned earlier, people are afraid, and the communication piece for me is huge. I really need to know where our folks are at, and making sure that there isn't anything that we haven't considered already that they're worried about before we bring them back, and make sure that their environment is as safe as it can possibly be when they do come back. So agility and flexibility is ongoing as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with that. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to our audience out there. We look forward to seeing you in person soon, but until then, we'll have more of these virtual events, and let's just stay in touch. Good luck to all of you.